Okay, now it's time to build the game console class. I'll put this in the dev.lpa.game package. This class has one type argument, so t, and that extends game. Since game is also generic, I need to identify valid ranges of types for this game. Here I'll use a wildcard to specify the type since I'm using the game and not just declaring it. I'll use an upper bound wildcard, so extends player. This class has one instance field, the game, type t, and that'll be private and final. I'll make the scanner private, static and final. I'll generate a constructor and pass the game instance. Next I want to code the addPlayer method, which has to get the player's name from the console. This will return an int, which is the player's index in the player list. First, this should prompt the user for their playing name, then wait for the user to respond. Once I have the name, I'll print out a welcome message. Then I'll return what comes back from the game addPlayer method. After this, I want to implement playgame. This is public and void and takes a player index. I want to set a local variable done to false. My while loop will keep going until this becomes true. I'll get the game actions from the game. These may change for a player as play continues, so I'll call this inside the while loop. The first thing I need to do in the loop is show the available options. I'll print out a statement that these are the actions to choose from. I'll loop through the keys of my game actions map. I'll get the prompt. I'll print that prompt and the key, which is the keystroke that will execute that action. After all the options are listed, I'll prompt the user to pick an action. Next, I'll get the letter from the user. You've seen me do this multiple times. I'll use next line on scanner, making it uppercase, and obtain the first character. The input is the key to get the action from the map. If I find game action in the map for the key entered, I'll first print a separator line. Then I call execute game action on that. If that returns false, it means the game isn't yet over. I'll print another separator line so that it separates the action that just occurred from the options to be picked from. Okay, that's my generic game console. I'll quickly test this by creating a shooter game that will have shooters as players. I'll make the shooter a record, putting it in the game package. This record has one field, a name, and implements player. I'll include two additional methods that would emulate some kind of shooter action on a game. I'll make these package private so that only classes in this package can call these methods. First, I'll code findPrize. This will return a boolean. I'll just print that a prize was found and score needs to be adjusted. I'll return false because we don't want the game to end if the player finds a prize. The next one will be useWeapon and return a boolean, but it'll take a weapon. I'll just print out the weapon name and again return false. Okay, that's good enough for the shooter test. Finally, I'll add a new class, the shooter game. I'll have that extend the game with a type argument of shooter. I have an error, and that's because I have to implement game's abstract methods. If I hover over that, I can pick implement methods. I'll pick both methods in the pop-up. I want to replace return null in the create new player method. I'll return a new instance of the shooter record, passing that name. For the get game actions method, I'll replace the return statement altogether. In this method, I'll add some game action records as well as include the standard ones set up on game. I'll first create a new map variable using var rather than be specific about that somewhat complicated type and call it map. I'll assign that a new linked hash map instance, and again I want to use the map dot of method, passing it key value pairs as separate elements. If a user presses F, they'll be looking for a prize, and that will call this game's findPrize method, which I'll add shortly. If a user presses S, they'll be shooting or using their weapon, and I'll call the useWeapon method. I'll add this as well shortly. Next, I want to add the standard actions. Remember, these are quit and information, so I still want this. I want them listed after my own options, which is why I'm using a linked hash map, otherwise the order wouldn't be guaranteed. Finally, I'll return this new map. I've still got an error there that there's no default constructor, so I'll create one. Finally, I'll implement the two methods I used in those game options, starting with find prize first. All my methods on game that are actionable menu items have to return a boolean and take an integer. I will get the player-by-player index and chain the shooter's find prize method to that. Lastly, I'll create the method use weapon, much like the find prize method. This time I'll call use weapon on the shooter, passing it pistol. The methods on any of the player implementations don't have to have the same return type or parameters that's required of the game's actionable methods. Here you can see that my shooter's use weapon method takes a string representing a weapon. Okay, that was quite a bit of setup, but I'll be using this in the future and I hope you had some fun with it, making it your own in some way. Let's test this out. I'll go to the main class's main method and set up a new game console. I'll take advantage of type inference and use var, call the variable console, and assign that a new game console, passing a new shooter game with the game title. I'll call console.addPlayer and pass the index back to a player index variable. Lastly, I'll call playgame on console, passing it that player index. If I run this, I can see the console prompting me for my player's name. I'll enter Tim here. And now I see the welcome message and I can see all the options available. So that's kind of neat. I'll try finding a prize, so F. Now I get the message that a prize was found and score should be adjusted and my options are printing again. Let me try shooting S. And now the message, you shot your pistol. Now I'll select I to get the shooter information. That just prints my record's default string representation so you can see the player as a shooter with my name. And now I'll quit Q. That does quit, so that's good. And the game tells me it's sorry to see me go. That's our game console class. I'm going to use this in the next couple of videos. The next video is a game challenge and you'll use this console to run it. The game will test your knowledge of enum constructors and both instance and static initializers. So I'll see you in that next video.